Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update on social media. Thank you as always for joining us. It is hard to keep up with President Trump with all of his executive orders moving forward fast as, faster than a speeding bullet, frankly, to try to from the abusers involved in taking power away from the American people. And I'll provide you the latest in terms of the court fights, the left's crazed attacks on him, and other issues as we kind of battle, really, for the rule of law here in our country. And Judicial Watch, of course, never stops. We have new laws, and to whether the Defense Department is going to disclose the full scope of his interference in U.S. domestic politics. And on top of that, we have the big breaking news of Kash Patel becoming FBI director, finally confirmed by the Senate, and we'll give you the latest on that. First up, though, is the president taking strong action to defend his prerogatives under the Constitution. And, typically what's happening is the left comes out and says the president's engaged in a coup. The president's out of control and he's doing things outside the law. But point in fact is what he's trying to do is not seize power in a way that is inappropriate. He's trying to protect the power and take it back from the bureaucrats to be exercised by representatives of the American people. And there's a whole series of agencies here in the D.C. that have been installed over the years, for instance, so-called independent agencies. And these agencies have restrictions on the president in terms of the hiring and firing and basically the running of the agencies in a way that is long been controversial, and despite prior Supreme Court rulings, contrary to the very notion of a unitary executive under the Constitution. The executive power of the president, I think I'm quoting it directly, is vested in the president, the chief executive. And that means having the ability to hire and fire staff. And not only that, but to run the government and the agencies the American people have solely designated him with the power to do. And Stephen Miller, who is, we've worked with Stephen for many years, back even when he was in the Senate, smart man. Left hates him because he's effective and smart and understands what the battles are about. And he really dinged the media the other day in terms of explaining to them, as he says, giving them a civics lesson on the Constitution of the United States. Let's play that Stephen Miller video.
It is true that many of the people in this room for 4 years failed to cover the fact that Joe Biden was mentally incompetent and was not running the country. It is also true that many people in this room who have used this talking point that Elon is not elected fail to understand how government works. So I'm glad for the opportunity for a brief civics lesson. A president is elected by the whole American people. He's the only official in the entire government that is elected by the entire nation, right? Judges are appointed, members of Congress are elected at the district or state level, just one man. And the Constitution, Article 2, has a clause known as the vesting clause, and it says the executive power shall be vested in a president. Singular. The whole will of democracy is imbued into the elected president. That president then appoints staff to then impose that democratic will onto the government. The threat to democracy, indeed the existential threat to democracy, is the unelected bureaucracy of lifetime tenured civil servants who believe they answer to no one, who believe they can do whatever they want without consequence, who believe they can set their own agenda no matter what Americans vote for. So Americans vote for radical FBI reform, and FBI agents say they don't want to change. Or Americans vote for radical reform on our energy policies, but EPA bureaucrats say they don't want to change. Or Americans vote to end DEI, racist DEI policies, and lawyers at the Department of Justice say they don't want to change. What President Trump is doing is he is removing federal bureaucrats who are defying democracy by failing to implement his lawful orders, which are the will of the whole American people.
Yeah, we are a constitutional republic, and we pick the president through democratic means. And the deep state and their allies in the radical left media, too many Democrats don't care about it, even though they acknowledge there's all sorts of waste, fraud, and abuse, are defenders of the swamp. As I've often said, the swamp here in D.C., the D.C. swamp has many, many park rangers. And they are out in full force. It's been super cold here in Washington, D.C., but I got to hand it to them. The weather isn't keeping them away. These lefties are out there trying to agitate against democratic control of the administrative state. Let's go through a few videos here.
I'm going to try out a new chant for you, all right? How about this one? Hey, hey, RFK, hands off the FDA. Hey, hey, RFK, hands
Look, these leftists, these Democrats don't want the federal government agencies, the deep state agencies like the FDA, to be accountable to the American people, especially their elected president of the United States and his appointee, RFK.
And then we have the governor of Illinois, one of the most corrupt states politically in the nation, again, inciting violence against President Trump.
I do not invoke the specter of Nazis lightly, but I know the history intimately and have spent more time than probably anyone in this room with people who survived the Holocaust. Here's what I've learned. The root that tears apart your house's foundation begins as a seed of distrust and hate and blame. The seed that grew into a dictatorship in Europe a lifetime ago didn't arrive overnight. It started with everyday Germans mad about...
Look, this leftist politician, the notoriously corrupt Illinois Governor Pritzker, is not engaged in politics here. This leftist is engaged in incitement. When you compare President Trump to Hitler and Nazis, you're not arguing politics. You're trying to get him killed. I'll say it again. They want President Trump to be killed. They know what they're doing here, calling someone Hitler or Nazi. That's a leftist communist technique to incite and justify deadly violence.
Yeah, these folks are defending it's trying to stop right now the deportation of criminal illegal aliens. Now, most illegal aliens here are in violation of criminal law generally, as it relates to federal immigration law. But then you have a category that commit additional crimes, violence against people, murder, rape, sexual abuse, property crimes, etc., who are a priority, obviously, for any administration, at least ought to be, in terms of deportation. And it's just driving them, it is so extreme on the part of the left in terms of their support for open borders, they just can't handle any of them being deported. And they went particularly crazy, as you'll see here.
Well, the Trump White House just drove the left crazy again by posting this video of the beginnings of mass deportations of criminal illegal aliens. Now, last I checked, the Trump folks have been removing about 1,000 illegal alien invaders let in under Biden a day. In order to fully reverse the Biden invasion, though, they're going to have to remove upwards of 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 illegal alien invaders. They're going to need more financial support, resources from Congress to do that. And I tell you, Congress has got to get on the ball right now.
Yeah, so for all the complaints of the left, the administration is doing much more than the Biden administration did in terms of focusing and making it a priority to deport these dangers to the public safety and illegals. But it's only the start, and they're just in terms of the massive number, it's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, you do the math. If there were 10 million, 11, 12 million. Just figure out how many a day need to be deported in order to reverse the Biden invasion. So you're talking 6, 7, 8,000, and currently the administration, even if they're able to reallocate resources, don't have enough resources in place in order to do that, which is why it's important that Congress, in the least, reallocate wasteful program spending to spending to defend the border and protect the homeland, or allocate additional spending as warranted. And there's plenty of money to go around. The waste, fraud, and abuse is astonishing in its size and scope. And there was expert testimony before Congress this week that's going to knock your socks off. Here you go.
How much money do you calculate is wasted due to waste, fraud, and abuse in the entitlement programs each year?
Yeah, my number right now between federal, state, and local government is you can save $1 trillion a year by simply putting in front-end identity verification, eliminating self-certification, and monitoring the back end of the programs that are providing the benefits. Those three things.
So our budget deficit is $2 trillion a year currently. I think the budget generally is, $7 trillion? And he's talking about at least $1 trillion, and you can bet it's much more. And my suspicion is, and Elon Musk has shared this, and I know the president probably shares this as well, is that a lot of this money is used to reward the friends of politicians or politicians directly. I mean, when you've got $1 trillion or more in fraudulent money sloshing around, that's going to splash over to the politicians that control the spending and the bureaucrats as well. It's just too much money. It's too much of a temptation. It's like the billions that cross the border in cash through the drug trade, with Mexico. The money is staggering in terms of its size, and it corrupts. It necessarily leads to corruption at the border. So what's also frustrating is virtually everything DOJ is finding, all the waste, fraud, and abuse, USAID funding, you name it, has been known about in this town forever. Everyone knows about these major issues, Democrats and Republicans. Administration after administration, some seriously, some not too seriously, at least pretend to take steps to address waste, fraud, and abuse. And they generally know where the big issues are. But nothing's been done until this president's come back, President Trump. That's the reality of it. He's the first president in the modern era to take waste, fraud, and abuse as seriously as it needs to, given the gravity of its impact on our economy, on the rule of law, and and just the morality of just stealing money from taxpayers and throwing it out the window. So the idea that we can't get this done is malarkey, because it's not a secret. They all know where the bodies are buried in terms of waste, fraud, and abuse. And what's wonderful about what President Trump is doing through DOJ with the help of Elon Musk, and it shows you how important not mass movements are, but just like individual leadership. Because you could have a Republican in office who just does what Republicans typically do in office, manage the decline of the country a little bit so that it doesn't decline as quickly as it would under their political opposition. I mean, that's that's the charitable way of putting it sometimes. And, Trump is obviously not going to accept what passes for everyday business here in Washington, D.C., even from the Republican point of view. And as I noted in one of the videos, Congress has got to get on the ball. Now, the good news is Congress seems to be moving ahead with some of these budgetary and they call it reconciliation. I don't want to get into a congressional budget discussion, other than to say they are, on paper, at least committed to saving $1.5 trillion over the next 10 years. At least the House budget process is thus far. Now, is it enough? No. But prior to that, the information I was receiving from reliable sources on the Hill is they couldn't even agree on $10 billion in cuts. And now, in the least, it's going to be $200 billion in cuts per year. And if you're watching from home, on the technical side of that, you want the cuts to be front-loaded, because when you say $1.2 trillion in cuts over 10 years, you're basically saying that's never going to happen. I mean, how is this Congress going to police what's cut in a Congress 10 years from now? It's very difficult to do, to put it mildly. So that's why the cuts need to be front-loaded so they get done in these first 2 years. I mean, we're broke, America. We're broke. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when our economy collapses because of our government debt and the attendant consequences. I mean, we talk about banana republics, and we are a banana republic, or at least have been, with the political lawfare of the Biden gang and his allies in Democratic Party offices or political offices, like in the Fulton County in New York, et cetera, targeting Trump and other American citizens all throughout the land. But you can be a banana republic, too, in how you spend and waste government money. I mean, and as Americans, right, we all talk about third world governments that are notorious for corruption. What third world government has $1 trillion annually in fraud? We are third world in terms of our spending corruption. I did tell you that, dear citizens, but that's how awful things are. And with that massive spending comes massive secrecy. It's necessary to protect the spending because they don't want the truth to come out. That's why they're so desperate to keep Elon Musk out of these agencies, or specifically President Trump's staff people out of these agencies who want to ask questions about how the money's spent. Or even ask questions of, well, can we spend it more efficiently, in the sense of, well, literally, how much does it cost to get the money out the door? They don't even want to answer those questions. So this is a unique opportunity. And, my concern is, and I don't want to belabor the point because I'm always bashing Congress, but Congress has the power of the purse. They're ultimately responsible for all this money sloshing around that the president's trying to clean up. And as far as I'm concerned, the president's way down the field in terms of effective governance and reform. And Congress is still in the backfield, standing around watching the play action go on. I don't know if that metaphor, if I kept the metaphor working there, but you know what I mean. So Congress has got, now they are taking steps to accelerate it. I think they're beginning to get the feeling that, we need to act quickly. Inflation's way too high still. Inflation is high for a variety of reasons. Too much government spending requires printing more money, which also decreases the value of the dollar, inflates prices. Government regulations that President Trump is trying to curtail causes needless expense in the operations of business and the economy, contributes to the increase in prices. You curtail both, you address inflation. And if you appear to curtail both, even before you even get to the actual numbers have a significant impact, you can begin to curtail inflation because people start discounting, and they see things are working and they begin discounting the prices because they see the economy is going to be on the uptick in the sense of growth without the resulting inflation. So I don't mean to give you an economics lesson, but the left likes inflation because it's one way to fund government spending in addition to taxation. Milton Friedman famously said, inflation is taxation without legislation. So the left opposes inflation no more than they oppose taxation. they use both to support government funding or government spending. Excuse me. I guess it works both ways, right? But inflation allows more revenue to come into the government to support the outrageous spending, just the way taxes do. Now, the political trick is that the left doesn't, they're trying to figure out how much inflation is too much inflation, just like how many taxes are too much taxes. So that's what Trump is running against or fighting against. And he's facing hostile judges. There's a phalanx of hostile judges who hate his guts, trying to subvert what is the lawful exercise of his power. And the president's been trying to fight back in the courts. His Justice Department, which still isn't fully staffed, or at least staffed with permanent folks yet, took at least one key step to fight back in the Supreme Court on a real abusive lower court decision that prevented the president not only from removing a staff person or an official who nominally reports to him, constitutionally should report to him, but the judge put the guy back in and told the president he had to follow his orders, essentially. That he couldn't question anything he did, in the sense that, he couldn't overturn him, he couldn't fire him no matter what he did. Does that sound to you like a democracy, or is that something else? And I printed out the brief, and I want you to read it, because like Stephen Miller's video we played earlier, it nicely summarizes, and it's you don't have to be, I'm not a lawyer, I read it, I thought it was great. You don't have to be a lawyer to understand the issues at hand in terms of the threat to our constitutional republic through the unelected, unaccountable power, unelected bureaucrats exercising unaccountable power with the help of judges validating it and trying to constrain the people's president. On page 1, or yes, literally page 1, this case involves an unprecedented assault, and this is the brief filed with the Supreme Court to overturn that lower court ruling on what is the employee running the Office of Special Counsel, a federal bureaucrat. The case involves an unprecedented assault on the separation of powers that warrants immediate relief. What is the separation of powers? I want to remind you what it is. It is the powers of the government, the legislative, executive, and judicial powers, are spread among the three branches of the federal government. And what is the value of the separation of powers? It's designed to protect your liberty. When you have any official exercising executive, legislative, and judicial powers, that's a dictatorship. So it's not just the trite phrase of art related to the Constitution. It's a core, it's the fundamental structure of our government that the founders designed to ensure our freedoms won't be abused by an out-of-control, all-powerful politician exercising all the powers of government in one office. So the executive power is reserved for the executive, the hiring and firing. The judicial power, they resolve cases. They don't get to run the executive branch. And in this case, you had a judge trying to hijack the presidency. As this court observed just last term, Congress cannot act on and courts cannot examine the president's actions on subjects within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority, including the president's unrestricted power of removal with respect to executive officers of the United States whom the president has appointed. As to such principal officers, the most important of his subordinates, The president's management of the executive branch requires him to have unrestricted power to remove them in their most important duties. Enjoining the president and preventing him from exercising these powers thus inflicts the gravest of injuries on the executive branch and the separation of powers. And so the next paragraph goes into prior court rulings reaffirming this power on the part of the president. Thus, when President Trump, later in the page, on February 7, 2025, removed respondent Hampton Dellinger as the single head of the Office of Special Counsel, he engaged in an uncontroversial exercise of his Article II powers. Article II is the section of the Constitution, the article of the Constitution, delineating the president's executive powers, vesting executive authority of the federal government within the president himself. Since the Carter administration, the executive branch has repeatedly expressed the view that tenure protections for the head of the Office of Special Counsel violate the Constitution. So what Congress has tried to do is limit the president's executive power by installing and adding requirements in order for someone to be fired by the president. Either notice requirements or other requirements giving them a term through which the president can't fire him or her at will. That is because the agency presents a particularly clear-cut case. Investigative and prosecutorial decision-making is the special province of the executive branch, and the Constitution vests the entirety of the executive power in the president, as I said. The Office of Special Counsel operates as a self-described investigative and prosecutorial agency. So it's exactly the type of office that a president needs to have unfettered ability to run because we voted for him to do so. It enforces federal law governing federal employment and federal whistleblowers, issues subpoenas and rules, and in some circumstances can require other agency heads to conduct an investigation and submit a written report. The president's removal of that person accordingly implicated two preclusive presidential powers: the power to remove and the power to control investigative and prosecutorial decision-making. So who should control investigative and prosecutorial decision-making? A prior appointee of President Biden, or the person who was actually elected to be his successor as President of the United States, President Trump? The answer is obvious. And here you get a judicial coup taking place as described in this brief. Yet within hours of respondent filing suit, the respondent being Dellinger, the Office of Special Counsel guy who was fired, the district court, a lower court, issued an order at 8:35 p.m. labeled as an administrative stay. The order restored that guy to the office from which the president removed him, enjoined any efforts to impede his access to the resources or materials of that office, and barred the president from installing any other person as special counsel. On February 12th, the district court then issued an opinion granting a temporary restraining order enjoining the president and other senior executive branch officials and restoring the respondent to office. Fired by the president, hired by the courts. It's absurd. Until now, as far as we are aware, no court in American history has wielded an injunction to force the president to retain an agency head whom the president believes should not be entrusted with executive power, and to prevent the president from relying on his preferred replacement. Yet the district court remarkably found no irreparable harm to the president if he is judicially barred from exercising exclusive and preclusive powers of the presidency for at least 16 days, and perhaps for a month. Later in the brief, on page 4, this court should not allow lower courts to seize executive power by dictating to the president how long he must continue employing an agency head against his will. And the courts are saying, the lower courts, it's only 2 weeks. 2 weeks of no democracy, no rule of law. No, thank you. And so the government filed this on what day? I think it was earlier this week. It's not, oh, maybe it's dated at the end. February of 2025. Doesn't say the date. So Chief Justice Roberts, is the judge that handles emergency motions, or what could be termed as emergency motions. That may not be the legal term for this motion. It's an application to vacate the order issued by the United States District Court and request for an immediate administrative stay of that order. So Chief Justice Roberts is running it, and of course he'll be consulting with his colleagues as to what to do about it. And this is a good hill to fight on, because the courts have been clear in recent decisions that the president's got these prerogatives. And as I said in the beginning of this program, he this week also issued an executive order trying to marshal in and gather all these independent agencies that exercise executive power without the democratic check. President Trump is right now taking the biggest steps in modern American history to restore democratic rule to the United States in terms of the operations of our federal government. We have a Constitution that requires the democratically elected head of the president to exercise executive power, and he's trying to restore that on behalf of the voters. And he promised to do all of this. You know, I have to say, you hear campaigns and candidates say, well, we're going to do X, we're going to do Y, we're going to do Z, and it's like, well, I hope that gets done, but we'll see. Man, it's astonishing what President Trump has been doing. All within the law. I mean, there have been categories of actions that are obviously legal, that some are controversial, and some seem to kind of be at odds with the congressional rules or laws on the hiring and firing of staff. And his point is those rules are unconstitutional. I'm going to challenge them. As I say, to restore democracy. Yes, I know we're a constitutional republic. I do know that. But the head of our constitutional republic, at least the executive branch, is elected through a democratic election. And if those elections mean anything, it means he gets to run the government. Now here, in this case, we have the president trying to fire just one guy, and it's already at the Supreme Court. You see, the left is challenging his ability to basically fire anyone. I think I tweeted out something. I don't think we pulled it. You know, the left, and this is what happened during the first term. The left decided that the president can't be president. Like, he can't exercise the full powers of a president of the United States. He can't conduct foreign policy. When he went to fire Comey, he wasn't allowed to fire Comey, even though that is legally and constitutionally his authority. He's not allowed to be president. And the new rule now for Trump is he's not allowed to fire anyone in the government ever for practical purposes. Doesn't matter what the rules are. It's an outrage. He can't fire anyone. And obviously that's not the way it's supposed to work. And if we're going to get control of this government, we have to get control of the bureaucracy. I said it once and I'll say it again. We need political control of the administrative state. And yes, if there's a leftist running the government, that means you're going to get leftist policies implemented, hopefully only under the law. But that's the way it works. And when President Trump is elected, he should be able to get his policies implemented under the law. And the only way to do that, especially in the modern era, where the administrative state hates Republicans, especially hates conservatives, and is fanatically anti-Trump, is to A, cut back the bureaucracy, cut back its powers under law. Now, Congress can supplement that and assist by shutting down agencies, defunding agencies, making it easier. The president can do a lot to essentially shutter agencies, defang them in the meantime. And I got to hand it to President Trump. I didn't think we'd be talking about firing tens of thousands of employees from the federal government. It just wasn't on my list. And the left doesn't really know what to do. They really don't know what to do. And in another victory, we had Kash Patel finally confirmed by the United States Senate. A great victory for the rule of law. He's about the best pick Trump could have made. And here was the video I made when he was first picked.
President Trump made another inspired choice. He announced over the weekend that he is planning to appoint Kash Patel, my friend, to be the FBI director. Presumably he's going to fire Wray, or Wray's going to resign. The FBI is almost irredeemably compromised, and Kash Patel is nearly the perfect choice to go in there, bring transparency, reform, and accountability. Now, Kash is going to be attacked by the usual suspects, but he has a demonstrated record of uncovering, exposing, quite bravely, the corruption at the FBI and in the deep state, and he has vast experience working the bureaucracies on behalf of the American people. So what do you think Kash Patel should be investigating once he becomes FBI director? I've got a long list, but one of the things I think he certainly needs to investigate is FBI corruption and the targeting of Trump and other innocent Americans for political purposes by the corrupted Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Yeah, the FBI is a disaster. And I have a really big question. Should Kash Patel be the last FBI director? Meaning, can the FBI be saved? Can he save it? Now, arguably, if there's anyone who, quote, can save the FBI in the way of reforming it, making sure it's doing what the American people expect it to do, which essentially is just fight crime, it's Kash Patel. And I don't know if that can be done, but I hope that Kash is willing, if he can't do it, to come down on the side of me. And I think many Americans say, just shut it down. He's got to be willing to do that. And certainly Congress has got to start seriously considering it. I mean, what the FBI did in the last several years, and you can go back since the beginning of the FBI, it's been a menace time and time again, used as a political tool by president after president to keep a check on their enemies. And the FBI, of course, keeps a check on presidents as well. This is my statement that we issued when Kash was confirmed. Kash Patel is a patriot and he's a fighter. Judicial Watch congratulates him on his confirmation. It was a scandal the confirmation took so long. It really was. He should have been confirmed on Inauguration Day or thereabouts. Now, of course, I consider Kash to be a friend. We've worked with him for years here at Judicial Watch, and he's the perfect choice to reform the FBI. Kash will bring transparency and accountability back to an agency that became irredeemably corrupt and the tip of the spear in an unfettered lawfare against any American seen as a threat to the ruling class. From sitting on Hunter Biden's laptop in order to influence the 2020 election, the raid on President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home, the censorship of Americans, to the targeting of traditional Catholics, the FBI has shown itself a tainted domestic and intelligence service. Kash Patel has his work cut out for him. Under its previous leadership, the FBI has become an enemy of transparency, an enemy of the rule of law, an enemy of constitutional government, and an enemy of the civil rights of tens of millions of Americans. Now, Judicial Watch and I witnessed that firsthand when the FBI came to my home under Biden and Garland to serve me a subpoena in retaliation for our blowing the whistle on FBI and Justice Department lawfare targeting Trump and other innocents. Kash Patel should open wide the FBI files and expose its abuses of power targeting Trump and countless other American citizens. Along with bringing transparency and accountability back to the FBI, Kash must return the agency to its core mission, legitimate law enforcement that will protect the rights of law-abiding Americans and prosecute legitimate crimes. He better get to town. Now, if I know, President Trump has shown we can expect quick action from Kash Patel. I mean, he literally, not literally, he knows where the bodies are buried metaphorically. The FBI, who knows otherwise? And there's been no one doing more work to expose FBI corruption over the years than Judicial Watch. The lawfare especially. Lawsuit after lawsuit. And I'm hoping Kash takes another look at those lawsuits, both closed and open. Because sometimes we sue and we can't get the records and we have to shut it down or the courts rule against us. I mean, for example, we have a case that's ongoing, it's got to be at least 6 years now, for the text messages of anti-Trump FBI agents Lisa Page and Peter Strzok. We wanted their text messages, and it's been years. We still don't have them all. We're not even in a place to litigate the text messages they don't want to give us. That's the sort of thing that Kash has got to deal with. Now, what he said at his confirmation hearing, which I attended, I had the honor of attending on behalf of Judicial Watch, is that his goal was to, there's 38,000 or so FBI employees, which as far as I'm concerned is probably, 20,000 more than they need, at least. Of the 38,000, 12,000 are agents. And Kash pointed out that a good number of them, I forget the stat he used, are around here in D.C. They're basically just deep staters with nothing else to do other than wait around for their political masters to sick them on some target for political reasons. And what Kash wants to do is to send these agents to the various FBI offices throughout the nation. So there's a field office in Miami, there's a field office in Chicago, in New York, Seattle, Los Angeles, Dallas, Houston. You can bet there are field offices in most every major city. Field offices in all the states, I suspect. I don't know literally if that's true. I'm not quite sure how many. Maybe someone can tell me how many field offices the FBI has. Maybe they don't need all those field offices. I don't know. But Kash's point is these guys need to be out there investigating real crimes, helping local police solve crimes. I mean, it's like the stuff you see on TV, right? Wouldn't it be nice if what you see on TV police procedurals actually worked in real life, or actually took place in real life, where the FBI shows up to help the locals investigate a crime in the way that's collegial as opposed to antagonistic? That'd be a great reform. But I tell you, it may not be enough. Because if it's done partially, or if there's just a haircut to the budget, or the FBI agents, now some have been fired or removed or retired, but not nearly enough in light of what happened. For instance, there were at least, according to reports, 5,000 FBI employees who did work on the January 6th prosecutions. Of those, how many of them were in making decisions that no honorable person should have made in terms of buying into the political prosecutions of the January 6ers? I don't know. Then you had FBI agents involved in targeting parents and churchgoers. And I just don't think we should have an agency where a president can come in and just do that at the drop of a hat. If culturally and institutionally that is easily done, then that institution needs to be torn apart from bottom to top to make sure it never happens again. So that they are so far on their back, if they exist at all, they can never again do to President Trump or to do to anyone else what they did to President Trump. Or any other victims of FBI abuse. I mean, I've told the story before, I'll tell it again. I was at home, I think it was 2022 now, maybe it was 2.5 years ago. And literally, I had just had skin cancer surgery. I don't know if you can still see which side of it tells you how well it went, because I'm not sure which side it was. I think it was here. But it was unpleasant. If you ever had skin cancer surgery, it's surgery. And so I'm at home recuperating, literally the day of. I got home, lying on the couch, knock on the door about 6:30. And, no one else in my house answered it. No, I don't know where my kids were, where my wife was. Thankfully, I answered it. I got up, giant bandage on my face, and there's 2 FBI agents there with a subpoena. On my front door. I'm the head of Judicial Watch, the nation's largest and most effective government watchdog organization, and these guys at the FBI are coming to my home to issue a subpoena on behalf of the Garland gang trying to jail Trump. Why? Because Judicial Watch, again, was calling them out on their fake charges and legal concerns about Trump's conduct related to documents and everything else. Now, the agents were polite. I had an Amazon package. They pointed it out to me, and as I've joked, I'm the first American probably in history to have an Amazon delivery announced to them by the FBI. I didn't engage. I took the subpoena, and, Judicial Watch subsequently also got a subpoena. So it wasn't just me, it was your Judicial Watch. So if you support Judicial Watch, they were coming after you indirectly by coming after us. They don't want us to do what you want us to do, and they punished us for it. And it cost us a lot of money to deal with the subpoenas. I had to go and testify for 4+ hours before a grand jury run by Jack Smith's prosecutors. I had 3 prosecutors questioning me before the grand jury about nothing. Politics, First Amendment protected activity, what I had for lunch at the White House. My tweets. I'm reading my tweets to the grand jury. It was absurd. So between the FBI and the Justice Department, 0 sympathy. I would eliminate entire agencies within the Justice Department. Everyone in the Washington field office who was around for the last 4 years, I'd put them up for review as to whether they should continue to work there at all. You see these anti-Trump Justice Department employees resigning because President Trump's team at the Justice Department wanted to, or is moving to shut down what they believe to be a retaliatory political lawfare set of charges against Mayor Adams, the Democratic mayor of New York. And all these Justice Department officials, oh, how dare you, how dare you. And they're resigning. Well, good. But isn't it interesting, no one resigned when they were using Trump and raiding his home. No one resigned when they were writing memos about how to target people in churches. No one resigned when they were treating American citizens like terrorists for exercising their First Amendment rights on January 6th. Or at worst, engaged in misdemeanor or federal offenses. Crazy overreach on the part of the FBI and the Justice Department. No one resigned. Now, there have been a few FBI whistleblowers to their credit who were targeted and abused. So this is why I don't know if the FBI can survive at all. This is why I think the Justice Department frankly, should be a backwater agency when it comes to law enforcement, because I don't trust them to enforce jaywalking, let alone any of these political crimes. So I may be pressing Pam Bondi. I may be pressing Kash Patel. I may be pressing the Trump administration. And I'm one voice, I know. But I saw what they did. We have lawsuit after lawsuit to expose what they did, and one of the best things that Kash could do, or Director Patel, is to release the documents. Now, there was a goal, sometimes it was achieved during the first term, to release key documents. And sometimes the Trump administration would get it done. Other times it was a challenge. And that's a segue into my next discussion point. I've talked to you about our lawsuit against the Justice Department for the audio tapes of Joe Biden's interview with Robert Hur, then special counsel. Now, Hur said based on his interview, he didn't want to indict Biden, even though he probably could have, because of his awful memory. He obviously had dementia. That was the subtext of his point. Well, only the transcripts were released. And even those transcripts were edited to make to make Biden look like he was more with it than he was. And they have audio tapes of the interviews. And obviously, for political reasons, they didn't want to release them. They asserted all sorts of privileges, executive privilege, privacy. The president has privacy interest in his voice. President Biden had a privacy interest in his voice. They said AI will be used on the tapes. Crazy excuses not to release the tapes. And here was my analysis first out of the gate when we began the fight.
Hey everyone, Joe Biden is so desperate to keep those audio tapes of his special counsel interviews away from you and from Congress that he is asserting executive privilege in a way that's never been done before in American history. And of course, it's also designed to protect Attorney General Garland, who seems so intent on hiding these audio tapes that he's willing to go into contempt of Congress, joining Barack Obama's Attorney General Eric Holder as the only Attorney General found in contempt of Congress. I tell you, Judicial Watch is already now in federal court suing for these audio tapes. They have asserted privacy exemptions to hide the records from us. They're trying to protect Joe Biden's privacy. Now, on top of that, now they're asserting executive privilege. We've never seen anything like it before. The tapes must be devastating. Now, Judicial Watch is going to pursue this issue in federal court. Frankly, I think we'll get the audio tapes before Congress does at this rate. But we're here fighting for you, the American people, as Joe Biden tries to cover up his corruption.
So here's an update on it. we're still in court, and the court on his own issued, or her own, I forget if it's a female or male judge, asked the Justice Department, hey, there's a new administration in town. Do you have a different view as to whether to release the Biden tapes? Now, what do you think they should do? Do you think they should release the tapes? Do you think the Trump administration should sit on the tapes? No, well, obviously you don't think that. Do you think it's a tough call? No, it's not a tough call. What did the Trump Justice Department come and do? Or lawyers working for the Trump Justice Department come and do? They came back and told the court that we can't figure out what we want to do for 3 more months. You have to give us till May 20th to decide whether to release the Biden tapes. I mean, talk about frustrating. I mean, one of the biggest scandals of the last administration is the coup, is the cover-up. Remember, they engaged in a coup to remove him from power by knocking him out of the campaign, Pelosi, Obama, Schumer, etc. The media and all the president's men, all the president's women, Kamala, covered up his dementia. Part of this cover-up included Garland hiding these tapes. So this is not only accountability for those individuals, but it explains just how desperate they were to put Trump in jail because they knew Biden was so weak. And of course, their plans were kind of blown up when Biden, in the debate, completely collapsed. And so if I were the Trump administration, I would release these tapes immediately. I wouldn't wait 3 months. I don't know why they're waiting 3 months. So this is an example of where we have to push. I know there is this desire for transparency in the Trump administration, but you've got to kind of put, and they've got a lot going on. I admit, I know. Some of you are going to say, oh, give them some time, Tom. Look, guys, I've been through this before. Unless you are the squeaky wheel, meaning suing, you won't get the records. Even if the administration wants to give you the records saying, oh, we agree with Judicial Watch, we sometimes have to sue to get the records just to get them to follow up. And in this case, it's mind-blowing that they want to wait 3 months before they figure out whether to release these tapes, withheld for obviously fraudulent reasons. But I'm reminded by watching the video about how awful Garland was. Garland went into contempt in terms of refusing to abide by a subpoena on this issue. And he was not prosecuted by his colleagues at the Justice Department. They weren't going to prosecute Garland under Biden. Now, the Trump administration, under the Justice Department, should take a look at that and decide whether to prosecute Garland anew for his contempt of Congress. Because it can't be the only people put in jail for contempt for Congress are Republicans and supporters of President Trump. When you have an in-your-face violation of the rule of law, absolute contempt for Congress by an Attorney General of the United States, it would seem to me incumbent upon the Justice Department to seriously investigate and, if necessary, prosecute that. So Bannon goes to jail, Navarro goes to jail, Garland gets a get-out-of-jail-free card. I hope the Trump team takes a look at that. So I'll let you know. Hopefully they change their mind and release the tapes more quickly. But I don't want to wait till May. Get it out now. Trump's moving so fast. I think the Trump team should apply this speed of light approach, as they are with EOs and DOJ and things like that, to transparency. Get the documents out. Just get them. Push them all out. Shovel them out the door. We'll send the Judicial Watch team to pick them all up and bring them and put them on the internet so that you, the American people, can see. And there's opportunities in agency after agency to disclose the truth about the awful corruption and assault on our constitutional republic. Most specifically in our latest Judicial Watch Freedom of Information Act lawsuit against the Defense Department. We sued the Pentagon for records on Milley's, then Chief of Staff, General Milley's January 6 calls. What the heck was General Milley doing calling around in the days before January 6th? He was a notorious anti-Trumper. It's been confirmed. And of course, the military, despite President Trump's desires and arguably orders to the contrary, were late in the game in providing security at the Capitol on January 6th, even after it was requested in an emergency fashion. I know there's a lot of blame to go around there because Pelosi didn't want the security. Mayor Bowser here didn't want the security provided by the National Guard or other military assets. So what was General Milley saying and doing? Was he part of that cabal in the military who did not want to provide military support for security on Capitol Hill? Because they did not want to give Trump any credit by having the military provide support at the Capitol. I think that's what was going on there. Because Trump thought D.C. was out of control, having the military present providing security in our nation's capital, they thought would benefit him politically. That's my analysis. So that's my theory of the case. And some of these questions that I have, and I think you will have also, can be answered by our lawsuit. We sued or began asking for questions about this in December of last year. We asked simply for records and communications about 2 conference calls hosted by former Defense Department employees, or then acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller, so he was the Secretary of Defense for Trump, then Secretary of Army Ryan McCarthy, and then Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Mark Milley on January 3rd and 4th of 2021 with the Department of Justice, with the Department of Interior, and the Department of Homeland Security. The subject of these conference calls was the coordination for and the common operating picture for the January 6, 2021 electoral certification taking place in the United States Capitol building in Washington, D.C. In testimony to the Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack, which I call the Pelosi Rump Committee, Milley stated, so there was a series of meetings prior to the 6th, and we can get you the exact dates and who's in the meetings, etc., interagency meetings with the acting Sec Defense Miller and others, and I'm involved in those meetings as well. These are in the end of December, so to speak, and they will go all the way through, I want to say, the 2nd or 3rd, maybe 4th or something like that. These are telephonic conference calls to try to figure out exactly what the security measures were going to be for January 6th. So if you want a serious January 6th investigation, you want these documents. Now, Milley is notorious. He got a pardon from Biden, a pardon that I believe to be invalid, that should not prohibit any court-martial of him for his efforts to work with the Chinese, promise the Chinese to give them a heads up if we were going to do anything militarily against them. How is that not subject to court-martial? And he was denigrating President Trump, insubordination to the max. Strongest case for court-martial in 100 years plus. Frankly, the strongest case since Benedict Arnold. Let me be blunt. And so Biden's sham pardon of Milley for unspecified offenses doesn't cut it and should be considered invalid, and President Trump should continue through Pete Hegseth to court-martial him. Now, right now, they're trying administratively, I think, to take away consider whether to demote him and investigate his conduct administratively. We'll see how that works out. General Mark Milley and many deep staters at the Pentagon hated President Trump, so their role on January 6th is well worth exploring. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth should order full transparency and disclosure. So Pete Hegseth, Secretary Hegseth, if you're watching this episode of Judicial Watch's Weekly Update, take a look at this FOIA request. Ask your lawyers, what FOIA lawsuits are we getting? Are we responding to them? And if we're not, why not? That should be a priority for transparency. He's more transparent than most any other Secretary of Defense in recent memory. I don't know if you've seen his videos describing his work and what he's doing. It's excellent work. And I suggest he focuses on FOIA. Now, we already have a concurrent, I shouldn't say concurrent, we already have a lawsuit that touches on these issues because we sued in December for details of a reported meeting between Merrick Garland and Milley in which they discussed President Trump and during which Milley pressured Garland to target far-right militia movements. I think this was after January 6th. Again, hey, Justice Department, give us the documents. Give us the documents. So, as you see, we don't stop suing. We will support transparency, encourage transparency, but we recognize even in a presidency run by someone so committed personally to transparency as President Trump, we just have to be in court to try to get the documents. And that's the only way to get the attention of folks in leadership as well. So these are big opportunities for the Trump administration, on top of everything else they're doing, to expose the corruption. Prosecutions are important, and I hope prosecutions occur under law. But accountability also includes just knowing what happened. And we need to know what happened. And in doing so, we not only educate the public about the need for more significant accountability, but we know what to do to make it to ensure it doesn't happen again. So much going on here at Judicial Watch. More lawsuits coming. I mean, I had some lawsuits that I wanted to talk about tonight, but I wasn't able to get to. So we're just not slowing down. We are relentless on behalf of the rule of law, transparency, and accountability. And without Judicial Watch, I don't know where the country would be. And so I encourage you to support our work by going to judicialwatch.org and making a donation. Make your most generous donation. We're a charity. It's tax deductible to the full extent of the law. If you're already donating, thank you. I encourage you to re-up. And if you're not donating, I encourage you to join our cause, join our movement. And with that, I'll see you here next week, I hope, on the Judicial Watch Weekly Update. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.